Welcome to our deep dive. We're going to be looking into something pretty fascinating today, the world of unconscious cognition.
Hmm.
We often think of thinking as this conscious process, something we have control over.
Right.
But what if most of our cognitive activity is actually happening below the surface?
Yeah, like an iceberg.
Exactly like an iceberg. We only see the tip,
Hmm.
but there's this whole vast hidden world beneath.
It's true.
And that's what we're going to explore today with the help of our expert.
Happy to be here.
They're amazing at explaining complex ideas and really making us think about why they matter.
Well, thank you.
So let's dive right in. When we talk about cognition, we usually think of it as something uniquely human.
Yeah,
But you've got a broader definition, don't you?
I do. I think we need to consider cognition as a process that interprets information within a context to connect it with meaning.
Okay, so it's not just about thinking. It's about making sense of the world around us.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that means that even technical systems could be considered to engage in cognition.
Wait, hold on. Are you saying that my smartphone is thinking now?
Well, not exactly thinking in the way we do, but it's interpreting and responding to information in its environment.
Yeah. Interesting. So give me an example.
Sure, think of an RFID chip. It modulates a radio beam to encode information, right? It's interpreting its surroundings and assigning meaning all within the confines of its programming.
Okay, so it's making choices based on data. That's kind of mind-blowing. Does that mean like everything is thinking?
Yeah.
What about a tsunami or a glacier?
That's where the specifics of our definition become really important. A tsunami is a powerful force of nature, no doubt, but it lacks that element of interpretation and choice.
Right, it's just reacting to the environment.
Exactly. It reacts to physical forces, but it doesn't interpret information and connect it to meaning the way we're discussing.
Mm.
So, no, tsunamis and glaciers aren't thinking in this sense.
Okay, so we've got some boundaries here. Tsunamis out, brains in tech.
I like it.
So let's go deeper into this non-conscious part of our brains. What's happening in that hidden world?
Think of it as the super fast, behind the scenes processor of your mind. It's constantly working, analyzing information, making decisions without you even realizing it.
Wow, no wonder I can never keep up with my own thoughts.
Right. Studies show that the non-conscious processes information in about 200 milliseconds.
That's incredibly fast.
Yeah, while conscious thought takes around 500 milliseconds.
Okay, so it's like lightning speed compared to our conscious minds.
Exactly. And that speed allows it to handle a huge amount of information, filtering out what's important and keeping us functioning smoothly.
Fascinating.
Uh-huh.
But how does this non-conscious processing differ from, say, subliminal messaging or the invisible gorilla experiment?
Good question. Subliminal messaging is about presenting information below the threshold of conscious awareness, but it can still have a subtle influence on us.
Right, like those hidden messages in advertising.
Exactly. The invisible gorilla experiment is a great example of what we call the attentional blink. It shows how our conscious attention, when focused on a specific task, can completely miss even obvious things.
Yeah, I remember that one. Viewers are so focused on counting basketball passes, they miss a gorilla walking right across the screen.
It's amazing, isn't it? It highlights the limits of our conscious awareness.
Oh, I've totally been there. Like when you walk into a room and forget why you went there because you got distracted by something shiny.
Happens to the best of us.
Right.
It makes you wonder, though, what are the potential downsides of being so consciously focused?
Right. Could all this concentration actually be holding us back in some ways?
That's where things get really interesting. There are a couple of novels that explore this idea in a really thought-provoking way. Tom McCarthy's Remainder and Peter Watts's Blind Sight.
I've heard of those. They're pretty intense, right?
Yeah. In Remainder, the protagonist loses his non-conscious cognitive abilities after an accident,
Oh, wow.
and he becomes obsessed with trying to recreate those feelings of effortless, embodied experience that he's lost.
So he can't just be in the world anymore. He has to overthink everything.
Exactly. He's stuck outside, looking in, unable to access that flow state where things just come naturally.
That's a pretty terrifying thought.
It is. And Blind Sight takes a completely different approach. It introduces an alien species that's incredibly advanced technologically, way beyond humans.
Okay.
But here's the twist. They completely lack conscious thought.
Really? So they're like super intelligent zombies.
In a way, you could think of them like blind sight patients in the medical sense, able to see, but not consciously aware of seeing.
Whoa, that's a mind bender. So are you saying that consciousness might actually be a disadvantage in some situations?
That's the unsettling implication of the book. Our brains use a massive amount of energy to maintain consciousness.
That makes sense. We're constantly thinking, worrying, planning.
And all that mental activity can make us slower, more self-absorbed, and prone to errors in judgment. In certain scenarios, those costs of consciousness could be a real liability.
So in this high-stakes world, the blind site depicts being conscious could actually holding us back.
Exactly. The aliens in the novel, they're called scramblers, thrive precisely because they don't have those limitations. They process information faster and they're not burdened by emotional biases or self-awareness.
Wow, so in the grand scheme of things, are we humans actually the slow pokes of the universe? But how does this idea of unconscious cognition play out in the real world? I mean, we're not all battling aliens yet. But what about the systems and structures that shape our lives, like cities or financial markets?
That's where the concept of cognitive assemblages comes in. Think of it as networks of human and technical cognizers all working together, processing information, making decisions, and ultimately shaping outcomes.
So it's like our cities, our financial markets, even our social media feeds, all these interconnected systems where people and technology are constantly interacting.
Exactly. It's a complex web of human and technical cognition working in concert.
But why should we care about these cognitive assemblages? What's the big deal?
The big deal is that these assemblages are inherently political. They have a huge impact on how power is distributed and exercised.
Okay, that makes sense. The way these systems are designed can really influence who benefits and who loses out.
Absolutely. And because they often operate in ways that are invisible to us, they can influence our thoughts, our choices, even our sense of who we are without us even realizing it.
That's a bit unsettling. It's like
Yeah.
we're being controlled by forces we don't even understand.
It's a real concern. And that's why it's so important to bring these systems into the light, to understand how they work and how they're shaping our world.
Okay, I'm with you. So can you give me some concrete examples of these cognitive assemblages in action?
Absolutely. Let's start with something we all experience: urban infrastructure.
Okay.
Think about a city's traffic management system. Like in Los Angeles, they have the Automated Traffic Surveillance and Control System, or ATSAC. It uses a network of sensors, algorithms, and human operators to manage the flow of traffic on thousands of miles of roads.
Yeah, I remember reading about that. It's pretty impressive how they use technology to try and tame that LA traffic.
It's a perfect example of a cognitive assemblage. Drivers are making decisions based on their perceptions and goals, traffic lights are changing based on real-time sensor data, and human operators are monitoring the entire system, making adjustments as needed. It's all interconnected with human and technical cognition working in concert.
It's like this giant invisible dance of data and decisions happening all around us.
Yeah.
And we're all just caught in the middle of it.
Precisely. Another fascinating example is the sociometer, developed at MIT.
I haven't heard of that one.
It's a device that can predict group decisions based solely on analyzing non-linguistic social cues, like body language and tone of voice.
So they can tell what a group will decide before they even say it. That's almost like mind reading.
It is, in a way.
Yeah.
It's mind-blowing because it reveals just how much of our communication happens on a non-conscious level.
Wow, that's amazing. What other examples are there?
Let's talk about something a bit more unsettling: somatic surveillance.
Somatic surveillance. What's that?
It's about using technology to monitor and track our bodies. There's this project called the Machine, which uses sensors to track a person's movements and then displays them in real time on a skinless anatomical model.
Okay, that's pretty creepy. It's like our bodies are becoming data points, constantly being monitored and analyzed without our consent.
And that's precisely the concern. These technologies are blurring the lines between our physical and digital selves in ways we're only beginning to understand.
It's like we're losing control over our own bodies.
It's a valid fear, and it's one we need to address as these technologies become more prevalent.
Absolutely. Speaking of blurred lines, drone warfare is another area where the distinction between human and machine is getting really fuzzy.
You're right. The increasing autonomy of drones raises all sorts of ethical dilemmas. For example, if an autonomous drone strikes a target, who's responsible? The pilot operating it remotely, the programmers who designed its algorithms, the policymakers who authorized its use.
Yeah, it's a chain of responsibility that gets tangled pretty quickly, especially as these machines become more sophisticated and capable of making decisions on their own.
Exactly. And that brings us to another crucial aspect of cognitive assemblages: temporality.
Temporality, you mean time. What does time have to do with all this?
Time is a crucial element in how these systems operate, particularly in the world of finance. For example, financial instruments like derivatives are essentially contracts about the future, bets on what the value of something will be at a later date. They create these unique temporal loops, pulling the future into the present.
That's a bit hard to wrap my head around, but I guess it's like trying to predict the stock market. You're essentially betting on the future.
Exactly. And with the rise of high-frequency trading, HFT, That temporal game has been accelerated to a mind-boggling speed.
HFT. That's where computers make millions of trades per second, right?
That's it. In HFT, algorithms execute trades at speeds far beyond human comprehension, creating a machine ecology with its own unique temporalities and dynamics.
I remember reading about the flash crash of 2010 when the market tanked almost 1,000 points in minutes. Wasn't that blamed on HFT algorithms going haywire?
That's a prime example of how the speed and complexity of these systems can create instability and lead to unintended consequences. It also highlights the concept of punctuated agency, where the speed of algorithmic trading creates gaps in time where human intervention is simply impossible.
So it's like we're building these incredibly powerful machines, but we haven't quite figured out how to control them, or even if we can control them at all.
That's the core challenge we face in this era of cognitive assemblages. We need to rethink our ideas about agency, responsibility, and control in a world where human and technical cognition are so intertwined.
So where do we go from here? How can we make sure these cognitive assemblages are serving humanity rather than the other way around?
That's the million-dollar question, and it's one that requires insights from multiple perspectives, especially from the humanities.
Wait, the humanities? What can philosophers and literary critics contribute to a world of high-frequency trading and drone warfare?
They can help us grapple with the ethical and social implications of these technologies. They can provide frameworks for thinking about meaning, value, and purpose in a world increasingly shaped by non-conscious processes.
It's not just about the technical nuts and bolts. It's about the bigger picture, the human story behind it all.
Exactly. And that's where the humanities can play a vital role. They can help us bridge the gap between the technical and the human, between the what and the why.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all connects. Now, before we move on, there's one more source I want to bring into the mix. Colson Whitehead's The Intuitionist. It's set in a world where elevator inspectors are like philosophers debating different theories of how elevators work.
The Intuitionist. A brilliant exploration of race technology, and most importantly, the power of intuition.
The novel is filled with these intriguing passages about the black box of technology, the idea that some things may remain forever beyond our understanding or prediction. What are your thoughts on this?
The Intuitionist brilliantly connects the world of technology to profound questions about human experience and the limits of knowledge. It challenges us to think about the ways in which we interact with and understand the complex systems that surround us.
It's as if the novel itself acts as a cognitive assemblage, weaving together different ideas, perspectives, and ways of thinking.
And that's perhaps the most important takeaway from this entire discussion. To truly understand the world we inhabit, we need to embrace this kind of multifaceted, interconnected approach. We need to move beyond simplistic explanations and acknowledge the complexity and nuance of the systems we're a part of.
Well said. Stay tuned, because after a short break, we'll continue our exploration of the Intuitionist and what it can teach us about the utopian potential of cognitive assemblages. This is a deep dive you won't want to miss.
Looking forward to it.
Welcome back. We were talking about Colson Whitehead's The Intuitionist before the break, and its unusual perspective on technology, especially unconscious cognition. It's not your average tech thriller, that's for sure.
It really isn't. It uses this seemingly ordinary world of elevators to explore some much deeper questions. It's fascinating.
Yeah, the idea of elevator inspectors as these like philosophers debating different theories about how these machines work. I love that.
It's such a unique concept, right? It sets up this clash between two ways of understanding these complex systems.
So tell me more about these competing schools of thought that Whitehead creates.
Well, you've got the empiricists on one side. They believe in meticulous inspection, data analysis, all about facts and figures, absolute certainty.
Okay, so they're the data-driven types.
Exactly. Then on the other side, you have the intuitionists. They rely more on gut feeling, you could say, a deeper understanding that goes beyond logic and reason.
So it's like the classic battle between logic and intuition, but played out in this very practical world of elevator mechanics.
Precisely. And our protagonist, Leela Mae Watson, she's caught right in the middle of these two worlds.
Now, Leela Mae, she's not just any elevator inspector, is she?
No, she's not. She's brilliant, but she's also the first colored woman in this very male-dominated field. So her journey to understand elevators becomes intertwined with her struggles against racial and gender bias.
Wow, so it's a story about technology, but it's also about social structures and power dynamics.
Exactly. Whitehead weaves those themes together so skillfully.
And then there's this idea of the black box at the heart of the novel. Can you talk more about that?
The black box is this unknowable space within the elevator. It's essential to its function, but ultimately impenetrable. It represents the limits of our understanding, even with all our advanced technology.
So even with all our data and analysis, there are still things we can't fully grasp.
Exactly. There are always going to be mysteries, unknowns that lie beyond our reach.
And that connects back to what we were talking about earlier with the limitations of consciousness. Like no matter how much we learn, there will always be something that eludes us.
Absolutely. In The Intuitionist, this black box becomes a source of both fear and possibility. On the one hand, it represents the potential for catastrophic failures, things going wrong in ways we can't anticipate.
Right. But on the other hand,
It also holds the key to unlocking a new kind of elevator, a revolutionary technology that could transform the city, maybe even society itself.
the elevator as a symbol of social mobility progress, rising above limitations. It's a powerful image.
Very powerful. But it also highlights the risks involved in striving for that kind of progress.
So the novel isn't shying away from the potential downsides of technological advancement.
Not at all. Early on, there's a catastrophic elevator failure, and it becomes this turning point for Lila May. It forces her to question everything she thought she knew and to confront the limits of both empiricism and intuitionism.
So she realizes that neither approach has all the answers.
Right, it's like a paradigm shift in science. The old ways of thinking break down and a new understanding starts to emerge.
But that process is rarely smooth or easy.
Definitely. And what's really interesting is that Whitehead uses the language of mathematics and computation to describe this world of elevators. He talks about algorithms and finite state machines, which echoes our earlier discussion about technical cognition.
So even in a novel, we're seeing this connection between the way our brains work and the technology we create.
Exactly. It suggests that even our most sophisticated machines are still, in a way, reflections of our own cognitive processes, both conscious and unconscious.
And you were saying there's a parallel between the elevator failure in the book and a famous problem in computer science.
Yes, the halting problem.
What's that?
Well, it's a problem in computer science that basically asks if there's a way to know in advance if a given program will eventually stop running or if it will just keep running forever.
Huh, interesting.
And Alan Turing, the brilliant mathematician, proved that there's no general solution to this problem. There will always be programs whose behavior we can't predict with certainty.
So it's a fundamental limit of computation,
Yeah.
kind of inherent uncertainty.
Precisely. And Leela May seems to sense a similar kind of undecidability in the world of elevators. She realizes that just as you can't predict whether every computer program will halt, there's no guaranteed way to prevent all catastrophic failures. There's always an element of risk and uncertainty.
So the novel is saying that any complex system, whether it's a machine or a society, has this level of unpredictability built in. We can't control everything.
That's a key insight. And it leads us to the question of intuition. What role does it play in a world where we can't know everything?
Right, because in the novel, intuition is more than just a hunch or a feeling, isn't it?
It is. It's presented as a way of accessing knowledge that lies beyond conscious thought, a kind of embodied understanding that's deeply connected to the world around us.
It's like thinking with your whole body, not just your intellect.
Exactly. And that's something that's often overlooked in discussions about technology and artificial intelligence. We tend to focus so much on the rational, the logical, the quantifiable.
But the intuitionist is reminding us that there's this other realm of knowing, of understanding that's equally important.
Maybe even more important in some cases.
It makes you wonder what we could accomplish if we could tap into that intuitive side more fully, both in our own lives and in the way we design and interact with technology.
That's the real challenge, isn't it? To find that balance between the logical and the intuitive, the conscious and the unconscious.
It's a lifelong journey, I think.
It is. And at the end of The Intuitionists, Leela May seems to glimpse a new kind of future through her encounters with the black box, one that's built on a deeper understanding of interconnectedness.
It sounds like a utopian vision.
It is, but it's not naive. It acknowledges the complexities and the risks, but it also offers hope for a more just and equitable world. A world where technology is used to uplift and empower rather than control and oppress.
It's a powerful message and certainly a timely one. We're wrestling with the transformative power of technology right now, trying to figure out how to shape it in ways that truly benefit humanity.
And The Intuitionist is a call to action, an invitation to think deeply about how both conscious and unconscious cognition are shaping the world we want to live in.
It's a reminder that sometimes the most significant breakthroughs come not from pure logic or reason, but from that spark of intuition, that leap of faith that takes us beyond the known into the realm of the possible.
Well said. It's about embracing the unknown and trusting that even in the face of uncertainty, there's still potential for something truly extraordinary.
We've covered so much ground in this deep dive, from the science of unconscious cognition to the philosophical implications of technical agency to the power of literature to help us grapple with these complex ideas.
It's been quite a journey.
It has. We've seen how unconscious cognition operates in our daily lives, from navigating city streets to making those split-second decisions in the financial markets.
And we've explored the utopian possibilities of these systems, the potential to harness these interconnected systems to build a future that's more just equitable and sustainable.
But before we wrap things up, I'm curious, what do you think this utopian potential of cognitive assemblages might actually look like? How can we harness these systems of human and technical cognition to create a brighter future?
That's the question we should all be asking ourselves. And while there's no easy answer, I think the first step is awareness. We need to recognize how these cognitive assemblages are already operating in our lives and in the world around us. We need to lift the veil and really see these systems for what they are.
We need to be more than just passive consumers of technology.
Yeah.
We need to take an active role in shaping how it's developed and how it's used.
Exactly. And that requires us to think critically about ethics, about values, about the kind of world we want to create for ourselves and for future generations. It's not enough to just innovate for innovation's sake.
We need to be intentional about where we're headed with technology, make sure it aligns with our deepest human values and aspirations.
And that's where I think the humanities have such a crucial role to play. We need philosophers, artists, writers, thinkers from all disciplines to help us grapple with these big questions and to imagine new possibilities.
It's about bridging the gap between the sciences and the humanities, recognizing that they're not separate, but rather complementary and essential for understanding the complex world we inhabit.
Absolutely. We need both the analytical rigor of science and the imaginative power of the humanities to navigate this uncharted territory.
This has been an incredibly thought-provoking conversation. But before we conclude our deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a final question to ponder. If so much of our cognition happens outside of our conscious awareness, what does it really mean to be in control of our own thoughts and actions? Are we the masters of our own minds, or are we more like passengers on a journey we can't fully comprehend? It's a question that stays with you, doesn't it? Makes you wonder about how much we're really in the driver's seat.
Definitely. It challenges us to rethink those ideas we have about, consciousness, free will, all of that.
Like, maybe it's not so much about being in total control, but more about recognizing the interplay between our intentions and all those unconscious processes happening below the surface.
Yeah, that back and forth between the conscious and the unconscious. Learning to work with it, maybe.
And accepting that we're part of this bigger web of cognition, human and technical, constantly interacting.
Right, not just our individual minds, but this whole interconnected system. Kind of humbling when you think about it.
It is humbling, but also exciting. It pushes us to be more open-minded about what intelligence even means.
Exactly. Not limited to the human perspective.
Intelligence in nature, in animals, in the machines we create.
Who knows what we might find as we keep exploring this world of unconscious cognition.
New ways of connecting with ourselves, with each other even.
It's a vast landscape. We're just beginning to map it out.
Well, this deep dive has certainly given us a lot to think about, from the science of unconscious cognition to the philosophical questions it raises.
And all the potential it has to change how we see the world.
We've looked at how it shows up in our everyday lives even.
How we navigate traffic, the decisions we make in financial markets. It's everywhere.
And those utopian possibilities we talk about, using this knowledge to create a better future.
Just more equitable. Definitely something worth striving for.
It all starts with awareness, though, right? Recognizing these systems and how they work.
Absolutely. Can't change what we don't understand.
To our listeners, we encourage you to keep digging into these ideas. The sources we discuss, those concepts we explored, keep those minds open.
The world of unconscious cognition is full of surprises. Imagine what we might find just below the surface.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the hidden depths of the mind. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, keep wondering.